So here we go. The Star-Spangled Banner by Francis Scott Key. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars, through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming? And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Well, it's probably very hard for you to hear me speak this without thinking of the music. And that's fine. There's just a couple things I just want to note. When we usually encounter the Star-Spangled Banner, of course, we only encounter the first verse. And it's in the context in which this last question is asked, usually at a sporting event where we're all patriotic and saluting the flag and all riled up and ready for the game to get started, it might be a surprise to see that a close reading of this text shows that this is a question. It's not, oh, say, does that banner yet wave? Damn straight it waves. It sounds like it's a cheerful, exciting announcement, but it's a question. The speaker is not sure. And we'll walk through the other verses and we'll see. So, again, let's just go through a little bit of the grammar. The question is, can you see in the dawn, in the morning, that thing that we were looking at last night? And here we're describing that thing. Broad stripes, bright stars, blah, blah, blah. Ramparts. Gosh, what's a rampart? Wouldn't it be awesome if we had a magical tool that would give us a definition of any unfamiliar word? There we go. A rampart is the defensive wall of a castle or a walled city. And if you know the story behind the Star-Spangled Banner, then you'll know that Francis Scott Key was in a British ship. He was detained in a British ship during the War of 1812. It was 1814. The British had, they'd already burned Washington, and they were moving in Baltimore Harbor in Maryland. And Francis Scott Key went to the British fleet in the harbor on a mission to ask for the release of a doctor, a friend of his. And the British granted the release of this fellow. He was a non-combatant and not a threat to them. But they did not let Francis Scott Key and his friend, Dr. Beans, leave their ship until after this assault, because it would have given away to the Americans that the British were, gearing up for this assault. So Francis Scott Key had to watch the assault helplessly, and got the idea for this poem. So that's the story behind it. And so during the night, while Key was held captive by the British, he noticed in the morning that the American flag was still hanging over Fort McHenry, and he would have assumed if Fort Henry had fallen, the British would have raised their flag. So, but this story, or the first verse, ends with this still a question. On the shore dimly seen through the mists of the deep, where the foe's haughty host in dread silence reposes, what is that which the breeze or the towering steep, as it fitfully blows, half conceals, half discloses? Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in full glory reflected, now shines in the stream. 'Tis the Star-Spangled Banner, oh long may it wave, o'er the land of the free, and the home of the brave. So this is the verse in which Key, or the speaker of the poem, which Key wrote the poem, the speaker of the poem, technically from a poetic perspective, analytical perspective, we don't want to identify the speaker of the poem completely with the author of the poem. So the speaker in this poem has identified this flag, and he's really not in a big rush to describe it, because the setting of the poem, at night after a battle, at a moment of uncertainty, it's fitting for there to be a little bit of a delay. Now we have, where is that band who so vauntingly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country, should leave us no more? So he's shifting from the banner, he's asking, where is that band who so vauntingly swore? What does vauntingly mean? Well, let's look up vauntingly. Vaunting is boast. This is boasting. So where are those vain boasters who said this battle is going to steal our country back? But you understand the historical context. This is a generation or more after the American Revolution. The British have not stopped harassing this new nation. Now, at the end of the War of 1812, America will be pretty much secure on the international front as an independent nation. But it could have gone either way here. This was the early nation of America was quite at risk by the British assault at this point. So here, Key is turning from celebrating the banner to basically mocking the enemies that have not yet won. Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps' pollution. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph doth wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. So again, we're going from the bad guys to, we went from uncertainty to the Star-Spangled Banner, and now we're going from the bad guys to the Star-Spangled Banner. And this final verse, it's another shift. Thus be it ever, when freemen shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation. Here, this is an outward motion away from the particular moment, away from the particular instant of Francis Scott Key's discovery of the flag still flying. And now this is a voice for the future. Conquer we must, when our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. A very patriotic song, very much in keeping with the American sense that manifest destiny, we were given this land. God gave us this land, and we owe it to God and ourselves to make it a great nation. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. So, the next time you sing this song at a ballpark, think of the unusual third verse here. This text is, perhaps not as cheerful as you might want to think of when you think of, baseball and apple pie and hot dogs and so forth. But I guess it's fitting if you want to, think of, the blood that's going to wipe your enemies off the map. It's a rah-rah, very patriotic, very kind of aggressive song when you look at that full amount. It's a stubborn, bold song that insists to the world that America's here to stay, which Francis Scott Key himself was not sure of during the dark battle when he wasn't sure which way the battle had gone. Okay, for a little bit of fun.
Later on in the hour, we're going to show you how to spice up the kitchen by imagining hidden dangers. But first, we've got a special 4th of July treat for you.
Oh, yes, we do. The original copy of the Star-Spangled Banner goes on display this week at the National Archives. Restoration of the original manuscript has revealed there are actually multiple new verses that have not been seen or heard in over 150 years.
Right. And joining us now is the director of the exhibit, Susan Ekman. Hi, Susan.
Good morning. Now, Susan, most of us, of course, know that the Star-Spangled Banner was written by Francis Scott Key during a battle in the War of 1812.
That's how we got rockets, red glare.
Yeah.
Right, and the recently discovered verses go into a lot more description of that battle. For instance, here's a clip from the 6th verse, recorded especially for our exhibit.
Oh, that's great. Well, let's take a listen.
Yeah.
Tear their heads from our foes, let their hot blood gush forth, chop their limbs from their trunks, drag their bodies from horses.
Oh, very
that's wonderful.
patriotic.
Yes, Key was clearly very affected by what he saw during that battle.
Good.
For instance, the entire 10th verse is basically just a very detailed description of a bayonet wound.
Oh, very intense.
Yes, by that point, he'd been listening to the screams and cries of his dying friends for well over 12 hours.
Wow, now that's very neat. Let's listen to it a little bit more.
Okay, let's not. I will, if you are interested in that, you're welcome to listen to a little bit more of it. Okay, so just really quick before we close, if we do a close reading of this, I'm just going to focus a little bit on the punctuation. In this first verse, there are 2 question marks. In the second verse, we have 1 question mark and an exclamation mark. And remember, I pointed out that he is uncertain in the first verse. Here we see a motion from certainty to, damn straight patriotism. And there's still another question right here, but we end with exclamation marks, or 2 exclamation marks at the end. So now, there's more to analyze in poetry than simply counting punctuation marks. But when we see we have 2 question marks, a question mark and an exclamation mark, a question mark and a declarative statement, 2 exclamation marks, no question marks, we see a motion away from uncertainty towards, an excited, definite certainty. So the punctuation marks, a little bit of knowledge of the history, and an analysis of the language, recognizing that the first verse and the second verse have a more specific relationship to what Key is seeing. The second 2 verses open out from the immediate context of what Key saw into a greater significance of what the Star-Spangled Banner means to us. And just a little bit more history. The Star-Spangled Banner was not immediately accepted as America's national anthem. And a nice little detail for sports fans is the Star-Spangled Banner was presented, or really vaunted into the public eye because of a very successful, very popular rendition. Somebody sang it at the Baseball World Series in 1917, at a time when World War I was going on, and this song was presented as a tribute to the troops. It got incredibly popular, and this song has been associated with sporting events, really strongly, really ever since then. And then about 15 years later, after this, after it was popularized at the World Series, it became a national anthem in the 1930s, officially the national anthem. So this is just one of many ways that we could look at this poem. We could look at the language, we could look at the politics, we could look at the sounds, we could look at the imagery, the repetition of this, the Star-Spangled Banner. There's an unusual meter to this as well, which, if any of that interests you, there is plenty of stuff online for you to enrich and deepen your appreciation of the Star-Spangled Banner. But this gives us, I think, a starting point. Okay? All right, so on to the next thing. I will see you around.